UFC Fight Night, Luque versus Dos Anjos. The main event, two Brazilians go at it. Not in Brazil, though. In the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's your main event this Saturday night, folks. Again, in the Apex, it is a 12-fight card. You've also got Swanson and Hakeem Dawodu in the co-main event. Viana, Yasmin Lucindo of a main card fight. It's not the best card. Let's just be straight up honest with ourselves. Next week's card in Boston is better. This card is just a filler card to get you from the Nashville Fight Night card onto Boston, basically. It's a filler card. That's all it is. Any Apex card at this point in time is pretty much a filler card. But we have this fight card this Saturday night. We've got fights to talk about, 12 fights. Let's get into it, folks. If you haven't yet, though, make sure that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Tomorrow, we will have our Bellator 298 predictions. Maybe Bellator's final card in the United States. In the main event, we've got Logan Storley taking on Brennan Ward. Again, there is a very good chance that is the final Bellator card in America. Of course, they've got one scheduled for Ireland coming up in a month or two. I don't know. We'll see if they get bought out. I don't know if they get to Bellator 300. If I had to guess, maybe Bellator 300 is the final Bellator. I do not know. But again, back to UFC this weekend. Just a fair warning before we get into the video. This video is being recorded on late Thursday night. I'm just getting ahead on my video schedule. So that's why if there's any fights that are, as I'm recording this, Brady Heastand versus Damone Blackshear just got canceled. And then Terrence McKinney just got added against Mike Breeden. So if anything else gets added, you can let me know in the comment section down below. I will offer you my pick. But for now, we'll just have these 12 fights. Likely, I think Damone Blackshear will get a fight. However, again, in this point in time, I do not know Damone Blackshear's fight, so we will not talk about Damone Blackshear here tonight. When he was going to fight Brady Heastand, I'll be honest with you, I thought Heastand was going to win. That's just my pick on that, but that fight's not happening anymore. Anyways, on to our first one. We have got Juliana Miller taking on Luana Santos here for Santos. 5-1, making her UFC debut with this fight. Her last fight was a submission win in the first round at LFA 154. She went 2-1 over there in LFA. Her only loss being back in 2022. Her first fight in LFA, she lost it by split decision. She'll be taking on Juliana Miller, and both these fighters are just young in their careers. Miller, of course, the Ultimate Fighter winner. For Luana Santos, only 23 years old. For Juliana Miller, a professional record of 3 wins and 2 losses. She's 1-1 in the UFC after winning the Ultimate Fighter against Brogan Walker. She then proceeded to lose her next fight to Veronica Hardy, where she got beat by unanimous decision. Hardy was dominating her on the ground, keeping her down. Miller threw up a lot of submissions off her back, but wasn't able to really accomplish anything. And she'll be getting another grappler here in Luana Santos. This fight is kind of just dependent on who you think the better grappler is between Miller and Santos. Obviously, we've seen what Luana Santos was able to do. You saw her last fight in LFA. Big guillotine choke finish in the first round. Again, only 23 years old. You can say the sky's the limit, honestly, for her, but one of these two fighters will emerge as a new, younger, prospect, at least in the weight class. Because again, Juliana Miller, former Ultimate Fighter winner, sure, but really did not make a great account of herself and really looked, I wouldn't say lost, but just didn't look UFC ready in the loss to Veronica Hardy, who was coming off a long layoff, or at least away from the UFC, and Hardy went in there and beat her pretty much every single round. And then again, for Luana Santos, is only 2-1 in her last 3 fights, just losing a fight most recently about a year ago in 2022. I just don't know. It's a fight where, again, if you're looking to put any money on this, it's just not a smart ask. It's low-level women's MMA. Again, you're hoping that at least a prospect can rise from this fight, and I think that prospect will be Luana Santos. I think Santos is better than Juliana Miller, at least with her ground game. It was made a big deal out of Juliana Miller's her striking game, in the Ultimate Fighter season, about how she'd get into fighters' faces, she'd really attack, she'd really make you fight her. Didn't really show that in her last fight. I think Luana Santos is able to weather the storm. I think Miller is decent on the ground, but really I think her wrestling lacks. And yeah, maybe her jiu-jitsu is good, but I think Luana Santos as an overall grappler is better than Juliana Miller. That's why I'm going to take Luana Santos to win this fight by unanimous decision. Our next fight will be back here in the women's weight classes. However, this one's going to be a strawweight. We've got Montserrat Ruiz finally returning for the first time in a very long time against Jacqueline Amorim here. And for Amorim, her last fight was a loss to Sam Hughes by unanimous decision early in 2023. That's not ideal. Sam Hughes is not a great UFC fighter. I know she's 3-4, and she'll be getting Lupita Godinez, I believe, on Mexican Independence Day. I think that's a fight that Godinez is going to win pretty handedly. But yeah, for Amorim, her last fight, not a really good account of herself against Sam Hughes. just kind of got beat up in that fight. Sam Hughes was the better grappler. Sam Hughes held her down. There was not much Amorim was able to do in that fight. She got a couple takedowns. She shot for 10 of them. She got 2 in the first round, was able to win that first round. Then after that first round, it was all Sam Hughes winning the second and the third because, again, Amorim was not able to get the fight down to the ground, and she was the one getting taken down instead. And that was in Miami at UFC 287. She'll be getting Montserrat Conejo or Montserrat Ruiz. Ruiz has not been seen since her fight in 2021 against Amanda Lemos, where she just got finished in 35 seconds. It was that odd stoppage, but it was not a horrible stoppage by Chris Dione. That was in 2021. That was in middle of the pandemic, July 2021, actually, as we're getting out of the pandemic, but still. Ruiz's first fight in the UFC was a good win over Cheyenne Vlismas. It's a good win where she just gets Vlismas in a head and arm basically the entire fight. She's just able to keep, sinking in that head and arm, or at least getting the takedown. Ended up throwing Cheyenne Vlismas a couple times, and Conejo was able to have a lot of success that way, and she was able to win that fight with 10 minutes of control. Was not really able to do any damage, but at least the control time was more than what Cheyenne Vlismas was able to do on the other side. Now, again, I don't think Montserrat Ruiz is all that great. I don't think she is. I think she's very one-dimensional. I think she relies heavily on that head and arm throw that she does go to a lot. I don't think her striking is very good, but nor do I think that Jacqueline Amorim is very good either. I think, again, losing to Sam Hughes is one of the lowest level strawweights you can find, and Amorim was a minus 300 favorite in that fight. I know Sam Hughes is 3-4, but look at the fighters she's beat: Elise Reed, Estela Nunes, Jacqueline Amorim. Again, it's been bad fighters. So what do we get out of Amorim here? Because, again, you saw what she was able to do in LFA. She was pretty good over there. She went 4-0 in LFA. Her last fight, again, being a defense of the strawweight championship over there, which she won in early 2022. She defended it once. I know the LFA strawweight division isn't as good as, per se, a Invicta strawweight division, but still, an LFA championship is an LFA championship. But, man, Amorim really just wet the bed in her last performance. What do we get here against Montserrat Ruiz? I don't know. I think Amorim is likely... I think she's able to stay out the head and arm throw that Montserrat Ruiz will probably look to. I think on the ground, again, I think Amorim is probably the better fighter. It's just another very low-level fight. It just is. I mean, I think we're going to go with ATT's Jacqueline Amorim to win this fight. A lot of people taking her by submission. I'm going to say decision. I don't think she's... I mean, again, I don't know how good Montserrat Ruiz is, because Montserrat Ruiz has been just had a weird UFC career. She has not shown up in 2 years. She fought in Invicta twice. One of them is a loss to Danielle Taylor. She was booked against Emily Ducote in Invicta. I don't know what to get out of Ruiz. She was booked against Mallory Martin in 2021. Fight didn't happen. We haven't seen her since. I'm going to go with Jacqueline Amorim here. I'm not impressed with either of these two fighters. Obviously, Ruiz so far is the better resume, because a win, I think, over Cheyenne Vlismas does wonders, or it looks good at least. However, I'm going to take Jacqueline Amorim to win this fight by unanimous decision. Am I confident? No, I'm not. This is a pick that I don't know. But we're going to take back-to-back Brazilian fighters to win here. I think Amorim, her jiu-jitsu game is better. I think she's able to control the fight. I think she's really able to get out or stay out of that head and arm throw that Montserrat Ruiz will throw. So it's going to be Jacqueline Amorim to win this fight. She's going to get it done by unanimous decision in her second UFC outing. Our next fight comes here in the heavyweight division. We have got Martin Buday taking on Josh Parisian. Oh man, it is the endless circuit of low-level heavyweight fighting. However, Martin Buday is not in that circuit of low-level heavyweight fighting. He is dipping down now to the levels of low-level heavyweight fighting. However, he just fought Jake Collier, who we consider another low-level heavyweight fighter. There's a lot of them. Josh Parisian is one of those low-level UFC heavyweight fighters. He was booked against Walt Harris. Fight never happened. Harris was, flagged for USADA again. So they award Josh Parisian with the guy who's 12-1 professionally and who hasn't lost a fight since 2017 and is 3-0 in the UFC. Martin Buday has been a little shaky in the UFC. That's a fair assessment of what he's been able to do so far in the promotion. He comes in after beating Lorenzo Hood on the Contender Series, where he knocks him out in the first round. He turns that around to a unanimous decision win over Chris Barnett. I believe it was a technical decision, but he still wins it by unanimous decision. Then he gets outstruck against Lucas Bredsky, but he still wins. They give him the fight basically on damage, which I kind of get. And then Buday gets past Jake Collier in his last fight by unanimous decision. Now, I am anticipating Martin Buday to win this fight, but he has not been all that entertaining in the UFC. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. It's not going to be a great fight. It's really not. I mean, here on Tapology, Martin Buday 97% compared to Josh Parisian's 3%. yeah, I think it's fair to assume that Marcin Buday is the heavy favorite in this fight. Odds-wise, only minus 205, which I think is interesting because Marcin Buday, again, has been able to do everything right so far in the UFC. He's been able to maybe not put on the best performances, but he's been able to stay undefeated. He doesn't really get hit all that often, doesn't take too much damage. He wins fights. He kind of wins fights like Arlovsky before his last 2 losses would win fights at heavyweight, right? Josh Parisian's a guy who's 2-3. Comes into the UFC, drops on a Parker Porter, low-level heavyweight. Beats Roque Martinez, low-level heavyweight. He loses to Don'Tale Mayes, low-level heavyweight. He beats Alain Baudot, low-level heavyweight. He loses to Jamal Pogues, low-level heavyweight. I'm going to put Jamal Pogues in that ranks now after losing to Mick Parkin and looking absolutely god-awful in the Mick Parkin fight. So, Mick Parkin, by the way, not a low-level heavyweight yet. But all of Josh Parisian's fights so far in the UFC have been against low-level heavyweights. And if he can beat Marcin Buday, he will put Marcin Buday in the low-level heavyweight ranks. Basically, everyone who's not in the top 20 in the heavyweight division is a low-level heavyweight. There's a lot of bad heavyweights the UFC signed. Josh Parisian is not great. If he can beat Buday, he's going to send Buday down to the ranks of the bad heavyweights. That's just not going to happen, though. Marcin Buday is going to have his way in this fight. It's not going to be competitive. Marcin Buday is the way better striker. Hell, Marcin Buday has not been humped in a fight yet. Josh Parisian, north-south position. Don'Tale Mayes is up here, crotch in Parisian's face, and just goes boom, boom, boom. Just not like that, but humps him. It's weird. What I always think about with Josh Parisian. Anyways, I think Marcin Buday wins. Marcin Buday is the better striker. The fight, honestly, probably won't head to the mat. I know Parisian is able to shoot. He's capable of shooting. But he really just did that against Alain Baudot, who's a very bad wrestler. And it made sense for Josh Parisian to take down a very bad wrestler. And Alain Baudot, a primary kickboxer who has been out kickboxed in the past in the UFC, but also is a very bad grappler too. So it made sense for Parisian to do that. He won a performance of the night bonus back in 2022 for that performance in the Apex. But again, Marcin Buday has not been taken down in the UFC. You're going to see a striking fight, and in a striking fight between Parisian and Buday, I'm going to take the undefeated, at least in the UFC, in the 12-1 Marcin Buday to pick up the victory. Give me Buday to win by unanimous decision. Okay, next up, we've got a fight that I guess is, as I'm recording, this has kind of just been announced. Francis Marshall versus Isaac Dulgarian. For Dulgarian finally making his UFC debut, he's 5-0. He was booked earlier this year against Dan Argueta. Fight never happened because Dulgarian withdrew from the fight, so now he gets Francis Marshall instead. When you look at the Tapology pick so far for this fight, don't have odds just yet, but people on Tapology are siding with Francis Marshall, 82% for him, and then 18% for the undefeated Isaac Dulgarian. Dulgarian was obviously found by the UFC on looking for a fight. In 2022, he beats TJ Britton by first-round knockout to win the FAC Featherweight Championship. He is then signed to the UFC. He has not fought since then. But again, now he comes in the UFC after basically a year and a half off. He'll be getting a guy in Francis Marshall who is 7-1, but 1-1 in the UFC and has fought 2 pretty good fights so far in the promotion. At least, close-wise fights. I mean, he had a good fight against Marcelo Rojo, but every Marcelo Rojo fight's going to be good. He knocks out Rojo in the second round, and then in his next fight, he gets the French-born fighter in William Gomez. He loses a very close split decision to Gomez. It's not a great fight. It just really isn't. Marshall's able to work his wrestling a little bit, but just not much goes on in that fight. Marshall's first fight in the UFC was levels ahead than his second fight in the promotion against Gomez. But I don't know, what to expect in this fight. Dulgarian's a guy who has shown a lot of power at 145 pounds. Francis Marshall has gotten into firefights with some of these guys. I mean, getting into a fight on the feet with Marcelo Rojo usually spells trouble, and he was able to go in there and finish Rojo in the second round. He was able to go with a back-and-forth fight against Conor Matthews on Dana White's Contender Series where it went the full 15 minutes, and, Marshall ended up outstriking Matthews 110-74. And again, the Gomez fight wasn't his fight. Again, not much happened. You saw a lot of just inactivity on the feet, just a bunch of these guys just kind of just getting into a sparring fight. This is on the undercard to Pavlovich and Curtis Blades. And again, Francis Marshall just didn't take too much damage in that fight. Marshall got close to submitting William Gomez, got really close to submitting William Gomez in that third round. It didn't happen. But in the end, again, it was Marshall's kind of wrestling that won him some rounds. Gomez, it's just a boring fight. On the feet, it's really boring, but Gomez wins the second. It's not a good fight. Dulgarian's going to bring it to Francis Marshall, though. If anything, this fight will be fought. I know that's kind of a weird saying, but Dulgarian will bring the action to Francis Marshall. It's just basically how Francis Marshall will deal with that. And I think Francis Marshall will be able to weather the storm. I don't think Dulgarian is all that great. I think, again, he's still very green in his career. He's 27 years old and 3 years older than Francis Marshall, and he's had only 5 fights, given he is undefeated, but still no UFC experience, first fight in the promotion. I think it's a tougher ask. Because, again, Marshall's been here before. I think Francis Marshall's able to weather the storm. I don't think he allows Dulgarian to finish him early, because I think if that's how Dulgarian's going to win, it will likely be by that, and it will likely be by Isaac Dulgarian outstriking Francis Marshall. But that's tough, because Marshall has been in firefights before on the feet. You have seen this guy tested, and he has stayed in the fight, and he has sat down his punches, and he has returned it as well. So I think Marshall's pretty good. I think, again, that last fight's just kind of an outlier, at least we hope. I think Marshall's able to mix it up a lot, the wrestling and the striking, and all around, it's a good performance with which propels Francis Marshall to victory. I think he's able to go out there and pick up the victory. Give me Francis Marshall to win by unanimous decision. Okay, next up, we have got a newly added fight. Yes, it's newly added. Terrence McKinney taking on Mike Breeden. So, again, Terrence McKinney he's coming off 2 straight losses, came into the UFC, looked really good. He had the quick knockout finish against Matt Frivola, and then he runs into one Ismael Bonfim. Now, again, he's got the losses against Drew Dober, but I really don't put anything against Terrence McKinney with that fight, considering, again, Drew Dober's good, and Drew Dober beats a lot of guys. McKinney loses that fight. Then he beats Eric Gonzalez, and Eric Gonzalez did not deserve to be in the UFC. And then he drops 2 straight fights. The latest one being just less than a month ago when he loses to Nazim Sadikov, where he gets submitted in the second round with a rear naked choke. And then before that, he got knocked out in the second round with a big flying knee against Ismael Bonfim. But Ismael Bonfim is really good. I know he just did lose to Benoit Saint Denis, but Bonfim is still a pretty solid fighter. Both the Bonfim brothers are good. And Nazim Sadikov's a tough ask, too. I mean, Sadikov, 9-1 professionally, undefeated in the UFC. That's a tough fight for Terrence McKinney as well. McKinney will now get Mike Breeden. And I saw, because this fight has got announced, this being August 3rd on Thursday, I saw on Twitter, of course, McKinney reposted that his fight was just announced, that he's going to be fighting in a couple weeks. And I see the top comment is, Terrence McKinney, all right, I see you now jumping back into the fights with guys who don't deserve to be in the UFC. And it's true. It really is. But for a guy like Terrence McKinney, who is 28 years old, 3-3 in the UFC, this is the fight he needs. He's not going to drop a fight to Mike Breeden. He will not lose this fight. I think he's going to win by first round knockout. However, it's the fight that McKinney needs, because Breeden, similar to what Eric Gonzalez was early in McKinney's career in the UFC, or I guess just 2 fights ago, his last win in the UFC, similar to that, this is a fight that will get McKinney on the right track. It will get him a win. It will get him back on the win column, and it will boost his confidence again. Because, again, losing 2 straight fights, one by submission, one by big knockout, is tough. It's tough for a fighter, especially a guy, again, in McKinney who's younger in his career. He was only 3-3, who's got a pretty big social media presence as well. It's important he gets a fight like this. I don't think Mike Breeden's all that great. I'm not afraid to say it. I think, again, he's 0-3 under the Zuffa banner, the first one being on the Contender Series in 2020. Now, it's against Anthony Romero. I understand Romero's pretty good. We're going to talk about him on the Bellator card coming up, because Romero will be fighting one Don Rosta. Oh, I'm tripping sack. That's not Anthony Romero. My apologies. Wrong Canadian fighter. I really make mistakes like this. That's not Anthony Romero. Romero just fought Olivier Aubin-Mercier in the main event over in Bellator. I am referring to the other Canadian fighter, and Aaron Jeffrey, who found himself on the Contender Series, but didn't win. He actually lost in the Contender Series to Kyle Borjayo. That's my bad. Anyways, Anthony Romero beat Mike Breeden. And Romero against a good guy who got a main event spot against Olivier Aubin-Mercier in the PFL. You know how good OAM is. He is the favorite to win the featherweight division this year in the PFL. Likely if he can beat Shane Burgos, I think, in a rematch, which he probably will, even though it will be 5 rounds this time, but I still think OAM can win. He's going to definitely beat Bruno Miranda in a couple weeks. However, Mike Breeden, again, loses to Anthony Romero. Then he wins 2 fights at FAC, gets signed by the UFC, gets knocked down the first round by Alexander Hernandez, and then drops his next fight in a very competitive and actually kind of a fun back and forth fight against Natan Levy, but Natan Levy beats him. You look at that fight, Levy wins the first, Levy wins the second with his wrestling in the third round. Breeden really puts it on Levy. The output is there out of Mike Breeden in the third round. However, again, too little too late. He wins that round. That's the only round he wins. Natan Levy was able to do enough with his wrestling and his karate in the first 2 rounds. Again, though, Mike Breeden's a guy that I don't think really deserves to be in the UFC. I think definitely you will see it after this fight, because Terrence McKinney, I think, will really just mop the floor with him. I think this is going to be one-way traffic for T-Rex. I think McKinney just goes straight through him. I think he's able to really work his shots. I think, through submissions, it's going to be there, through the jiu-jitsu, but definitely the striking as well. I think McKinney's going to go in there. I think he's going to 1-2, wobble Breeden and just finish it up. Again, we haven't seen I pick knockout victory for McKinney a lot. I just do, just because I guess his first fight against Frivola. I'm going to pick it again. I'm yet to pick a submission victory for Terrence McKinney, so I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to take another submission, or another knockout for him. I think, again, I think he goes right after Breeden. I think Breeden is not competitive with him on the feet. And I think Terrence McKinney, again, with his speed and with his power, I think he wins. Terrence McKinney picks up the victory. He's going to get it done by first round knockout. Okay, our next fight. Why is JP Buday in the UFC? Like, what are we doing? Another guy who, I'm sorry, but doesn't deserve to be in the UFC. Why is JP Buday still in the UFC? Like, okay, I know people don't feel great. I've been looking at this online, minus 400 from Marcus McGhee, it doesn't feel like a great spot. Like, I would not put my money on minus 400. Marcus McGhee, there is definitely better bets that you can make, at least like on it with a sports book or on FanDuel for minus 400. Like, okay, I see no point in betting minus 400 on Marcus McGhee when you could just go and wait till the 8th inning, where, I don't know, the Dodgers are up 3 runs in the 8th inning, and you could, or 2 runs in the 8th inning, and you can get minus 400 for that instead. I don't see the point in betting MMA, especially with odds like this, because especially when it's not like a championship fight where oh, John Jones is going to beat Anthony Smith or something like that. It's Marcus McGhee and JP Buday. And as good as Marcus McGhee looked in his first fight in the UFC where he submits Judy Newson, he's still only 1-0 in the UFC. And yes, JP Buday has looked absolutely god-awful in the UFC. He's been straight up bad. You never know, right? You never know. Still, though, he doesn't have a chin. That's still, like, evident. I don't think he still has a chin. This fight's at 135 pounds. We've seen Buday alternate between 125 and 135. But Marcus McGhee's got power. Like, that's why he's at minus 400, because McGhee can strike. You look at his first fight in the UFC, he knocks down Judy Newson in the second, follows it up with a rear naked choke finish, submits him. Judy Newson tries to take that fight down 6 times. He's not able to get it down once. JP Buday has been dominating every imaginable sense of MMA so far in the UFC. He has. He got 2 shots in the Contender. He wins the second time, gets his shot in the UFC. First fight, Bruno Silva gets knocked down 3 times in that fight, all in the second round. After losing the first round, after being taken down in the first round, Bruno Silva beats JP Buday. Montel Jackson fight. Jackson knocks him down 4 times in the fight, in the second and the third. Oh, by the way, Montel Jackson out wrestles JP Buday in the first round to win that round. Then he runs into Cody Durden, who is a wrestler. Durden knocks him out in a minute in the first round. That was back in the summer of 2022 in the Apex. That's when we thought the Apex was on its way out. It wasn't, but Sarukian and Gamrot, main card, I think it was undercard fight, but still doesn't matter. The guy doesn't have a chin. Cody Durden's knocking him out, right? What is Marcus McGhee going to do? First round knockout, Marcus McGhee, that's the pick. I think it's a pretty obvious pick. I think it's going to be the pick a lot of people are going for. What does JP Buday do? Seriously. Does he take down Marcus McGhee? Okay, well, Marcus McGhee will probably stuff those takedowns if Judy Newson wasn't able to get takedowns against Marcus McGhee. I don't think JP Buday is going to be that exception. JP Buday strikes with McGhee? Sure. But if he gets into a war on the feet, in all likeliness, Marcus McGhee is going to hit JP Buday a lot harder than JP Buday is going to hit Marcus McGhee. And oh, by the way, I think Marcus McGhee's got a better chin than JP Buday. It's just a very tough ask for Buday in this fight. But, like, honestly, every fight at 135 pounds is going to be tough for JP Buday. He's fighting a guy here, Marcus McGhee, who took on Judy Newson on short notice at 145 pounds. He's dropping down a weight class, down to 135, his natural weight class. Originally supposed to be Gaston Bolaños. It's not Gaston Bolaños. It's JP Buday instead. I am so surprised JP Buday is still in the UFC. But it's time for him to go back to the regionals. And I would normally, say, oh, PFL, Bellator. It's time for JP Buday to go back to EFC. It's seriously, that's what's next for him. He should win a couple fights, then hope he can get a shot like with PFL. I don't know. right? He should hope that he can win 2 fights in the UFC and get a shot in the PFL Challenger Series, and there you go. But Marcus McGhee is going to go out here. He's going to win this fight. McGhee's going to win it by first round knockout. JP Buday does not have a chin, and Marcus McGhee is a headhunter, and Marcus McGhee will rock him. He will wobble him, and Marcus McGhee will win the fight, improving to 2-0 in the UFC with his first knockout finish in the promotion. Give me first round knockout victory for Marcus McGhee. Okay, on to our next one. Josh Fremd and Jamie Pickett will go at it here in the middleweight division. For Jamie Pickett, obviously his last fight didn't go the way that at least maybe Jamie Pickett wanted it to go. He was fighting Bo Nickel. Like, he wasn't going to win. He now gets Josh Fremd. Fremd is, a more manageable opponent at the very least for Jamie Pickett, at least more manageable than, of course, what Bo Nickel is. But Fremd is 1-2 in the UFC. Jamie Pickett's 2-5. Fremd's coming off a win in his last fight, his first win in the UFC over the undefeated Cedric Dumas. He submits Dumas in the second round with a guillotine choke. Dumas since then has gone on to beat Cody Brundage by unanimous decision in the UFC, but Fremd is 1-2 in the promotion after his first 2 fights, dropping one on short notice to Anthony Hernandez. That's going to happen to you, though, when you fight Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, and then he loses to Trayshawn Gore. He gets submitted by Gore in the second round by guillotine choke. Now he will get Jamie Pickett, a guy who has had some fights in the UFC, is on a 3-fight losing streak in the UFC, and a guy that I feel like the UFC told him when he took the Bo Nickel fight and when he took it the first time in December on that originally Blachowicz-Ankalaev card. When that fight fell out, I guarantee you they told Jamie Pickett, all right, you stay, you fight Bo Nickel on a main card of a pay-per-view, UFC 285, T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada, John Jones undercard. We will gift you another fight if you don't win. Because, again, he was not going to beat Bo Nickel in Bo Nickel's UFC debut in a fight where Jamie Pickett was a plus 900 dog in. It makes sense he didn't win the fight. He now gets his second chance in the UFC. But, Jamie Pickett hasn't been very good in the promotion. His wins are Laureano Staropoli and Joe Holmes back-to-back. Where are those two guys? Well, the Staropoli win, he beats him by unanimous decision. He's no longer in the UFC. He will actually be fighting in the PFL in 2 weeks. And because Staropoli outside the UFC has actually won 3 straight fights in Aries FC. Now, Pickett's other win in the UFC is against Joe Holmes. Holmes is a guy who I believe he's no longer in the UFC either after losing to Claudio Ribeiro. He's going to fight 3 months later. He's fighting in 2 weeks against Daniel De La Cruz, a guy who's 3-0 and AKA 31, not to be mixed up with the American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, California. This is instead the American Combat Alliance, Combat with a K, Alliance in Marksville, Louisiana. It's the only fight scheduled so far. What do we expect? I don't know. But for Holmes, he went 1-3 in the UFC, got cut. Pickett beats him. He then loses. He gets submitted by Kyle Daukaus, where Kyle Daukaus submits him with the Darce choke and then tries to claim the nickname the Darce Knight after that, which he did, and it's his nickname now. He's outside the UFC now, too. It's kind of a weird cut. They cut Daukaus. I don't know. He's in CFFC now. He will be fighting Greg Ellis for the middleweight championship over there next month. I think Daukaus will likely win. He's a big favorite. He's probably going to win the fight. And he'll probably either UFC will re-sign him or go to the PFL. Because I think the PFL is going to take a lot of this talent coming up. But Pickett loses to Daukaus. He stays in the UFC, gets knocked out by Dennis Tululin, who we're going to talk about next week when he fights Gregory Rodriguez at the pay-per-view card, which just feels like an absolute mismatch. But he loses to Dennis Tululin, he loses to Bo Nickel, and now here he is against Josh Fremd. Fremd, again, looked good in the Dumas fight because he's able to get Dumas down, but in his other 2 fights in the UFC, he hasn't looked good grappling-wise. He's been beat on the ground in the Anthony Hernandez fight, and he was beat on the ground in the Trayshawn Gore fight as well, but the difference in the Dumas fight was Fremd was the better grappler in that fight. He was able to get Dumas down. Dumas, again, primarily a kickboxer. Fremd was able to get him down. Fremd was able to get around his neck, and he was able to submit him with the guillotine choke. Is Fremd the better grappler between him and Jamie Pickett? Yeah, I think he is. I, once upon a time, picked Jamie Pickett to lose to Jordan Wright, not by knockout, by submission. I don't know why I did that, but I was like, Pickett's ground game is not very good, and I still don't think it's very good. He was able to beat Laureano Staropoli, but Staropoli got the better of him wrestling-wise. Joe Holmes is a boxer and a primary boxer, and Jamie Pickett had a little bit of success on the ground, but not much. Like, Joe Holmes makes that fight somewhat competitive because Joe Holmes out-scrambles him in that second round. Holmes wins the first, then Pickett wins the next 2. But Jamie Pickett's ground game is not very good. His kickboxing game is okay. We still have not seen the Jamie Pickett who won his UFC contract in the Contender Series. When he beats Jonathan Potty by knockdown in the second round back in 2020, that's a really good Jamie Pickett. He's going for it. He's being aggressive. He's looking for the kill. We haven't seen that guy ever since. and it's really confusing. His ground game really hasn't shown up. His first fight in the UFC, he gets dominated by Nchukwi. The fight's not close. We're going to talk about Nchukwi a little bit later, but that fight's not competitive. And then Jordan Wright, he gets knocked down in the first round. We have not seen a good Jamie Pickett. I don't think we're going to see it here. I think Josh Fremd actually gets the victory here, and I can't believe I'm picking Josh Fremd to win another fight in the UFC, but I think he's going to, because they gave him the type of fight that he kind of, they gave him a good fight in the promotion. Now, something interesting will be, how quick can Josh Fremd do it? Because can he do it before Bo Nickel did? Bo Nickel took 3 minutes. Yeah, I'll likely take Josh Fremd a little bit more. I've got him to win by second round submission, but I think he will get that submission finish. I think Josh Fremd, again, coming off his first win in the UFC, has found a little bit of momentum for himself, and I think he goes in there and he submits the Night Wolf in Jamie Pickett. He'll go in there and submit him in the second round. Give me a second round submission for Josh Fremd. It's Josh Fremd's second win in the UFC. So now on to the main card, and there is the aforementioned AJ Dobson. He'll be taking on, Dobson was not mentioned. Nchukwi was mentioned, and he'll be taking on AJ Dobson. An interesting fight for the main card. I don't know why this fight's actually on the main card, and I think actually Jamie Pickett and Josh Fremd will be on the main card as well. So our second fight, I guess, in the main card between Dobson and Nchukwi. Dobson's 0-2 in the UFC, and Nchukwi's 2-3. Don't know why this made a UFC main card, but I guess that's just kind of how the UFC is now with the damn UFC Apex. It's just odd. It's just odd. This is how this is going. For Nchukwi, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. He loses to Carlos Ulberg in his last fight, where he gets knocked down in the first round. Before that, he gets flying kneed by Azmat Mirzakhanov. He beats Mike Rodriguez before that by unanimous decision, and then he loses to Jun Young Park before that by majority decision. Like, his one win, other than Mike Rodriguez, is Jamie Pickett. Like, that's not great. And we talked about how Jamie Pickett's not that great. Like again, we just picked him to lose to Josh Fremd. Nchukwi's not the greatest either, but he's getting a guy in AJ Dobson who's 0-2. Now, Dobson has been on the wrong end of decisions against Jacob Malkoun and Armand Petrosian. The Malkoun fight, he gets beat by unanimous decision. Malkoun's able to take him down. It's kind of like every Jacob Malkoun fight, for being honest. Malkoun just kind of holds him down the entire fight, and then he gets another shot in the UFC against Armand Petrosian. Dobson's the one trying to get the wrestling, exchanges. He's trying to get the takedowns. He doesn't really do that. Petrosian outstrikes him. Petrosian wins 30-27. That was in Abu Dhabi. Again, I think Nchukwi's gonna have the striking advantage in this fight. I think, honestly, the grappling, Nchukwi won't really wrestle all that much, but I think he's he's somewhat decently good defensively. So I think Nchukwi's gonna win in those exchanges in terms of wrestling. So I think Nchukwi likely wins. I think a lot of people actually taking AJ Dobson to win this fight. Nchukwi is the favorite, which I would think. I know Dobson has fought better fighters. That is fair. Malkoun's solid, and Dobson was able to win the first round against Malkoun. And then Petrosian, is decent. Petrosian's a guy who I believe is 1-1 in the UFC now. Sorry, 3-1 in the UFC now. Totally forgot. He beat Christian Leroy Duncan. I forgot the Gregory Rodriguez fight happened as well. So, yeah, I think Petrosian. I think Petrosian's decent. I think AJ Dobson has fought tougher guys, but I think Nchukwi all around is a better fighter. Because what does Dobson do better than Nchukwi? Maybe outstriking it. Maybe he can outstrike him, like not power wise, but shot for shot. Maybe Dobson is a better technical striker than Nchukwi. Power wise, give me Nchukwi. In a fight that stays on the feet and both guys are slugging, I will take Nchukwi to win. I think he does have the better. I didn't think he does have more power than AJ Dobson does. I mean, a lot of people are taking AJ Dobson by knockout, but seriously, when you watch both these guys fight, Nchukwi is built like he's got more power, and he throws with more power. Now, has he been on the right side of knockout fights recently? No, he hasn't. But man, it's a kill or be killed type fight for Nchukwi here. He needs to win the fight. I think he's able to keep AJ Dobson on the feet. And in this type of fight, it's a striking fight between Nchukwi and Dobson. Both guys are trading power shots. I'm going to go with Don. I'm taking Nchukwi, the Cameroonian fighter, to win this fight by first round knockout here against AJ Dobson. Okay, it's the next day, but I'm back. It's fine. Got caught up doing something, but it's okay. It's now Friday, and our next fight is Polyana Viana taking on Yasmin Lucindo here at the strawweight division. For Polyana Viana, her last fight, a win. First round knockout victory over Jin Yu Fry. Probably her best performance to date. And for Viana, a fighter that does get a lot of finishes, especially in the women's weight classes. She's got two armbar victories over Emily Whitmire and Mallory Martin, and then another submission win in her first fight back back in 2018 in the UFC as well. All of Polyana Viana's fights, or all of her wins in the UFC, are by finish. Now she'll be taking on a young fighter, an up-and-coming fighter who's only 21 years old here in Yasmin Lucindo, who does come into this fight as the favorite. Lucindo 1-1 in the UFC, her last fight being a win over Brogan Walker, picking up the win by unanimous decision. Before that, though, her UFC debut, losing to Yasmin Ayargi by decision. For Yasmin Ayargi, her last fight, dropping one by knockout in the first round to Denise Gomez in only 20 seconds in a crazy result on International Fight Week. UFC 290, Volkanovski and Yair Rodriguez in the main event. So this fight's interesting. Again, Lucindo is the favorite, taking on Viana, who has seen success recently in the UFC, but is only 4-4 in the promotion. For Lucindo, again, she is 1-1. It's a main card fight here. Again, Lucindo is going to be looked as the favorite here on Tapology. You got Lucindo at 34%, and you got Viana, who's the underdog, at 66%. Basically, it's, again, is Lucindo ready for this spot against a fighter who is 10 years older than her, who is experienced in the UFC, who'll be making her 9th walk into the octagon? It's tough, because I would say Polyana Viana is a borderline top 15 fighter. Lucindo, I mean, at least Tapology's got Viana ranked at number 16, Lucindo ranked at number 42. Obviously, Tapology rankings don't mean everything, but Viana has looked good recently. She has won 3 out of her last 4, her only loss being in that fight to Tabitha Ricci, where she just got out-grappled in that one. But again, before that, 2 wins over the likes of Emily Whitmire, who is no longer in the UFC, and Mallory Martin, who I don't believe is in the UFC anymore. I don't think Martin's in the promotion. Yeah, she's gone to Octagon since then. She lost her last fight by unanimous decision. So you've got 2 fighters that Viana's beat who are no longer in the promotion, and then Jinyu Fry, who is a decent fighter, who just won by knockout, who just lost by knockout, but Jinyu Fry is now on a 3-fight losing streak after dropping one to Elise Reed. She's 2-5 in the UFC, and I don't think she's no longer with the UFC, especially being 38 years old. She'll likely go back to Invicta. So where do we go from here? Because again, Polyana Viana has beat 3 fighters in Jinyu Fry, Mallory Martin, and Emily Whitmire, who no longer compete in the UFC. And then there's Yasmin Lucindo, who is 1-1, has lost a fight now to Yasmin Ayargi, who doesn't look as great now because of her loss to Denise Gomez. And then the Brogan Walker win, which is a win, but Brogan Walker's 0-2 in the UFC and has a loss to Juliana Miller, who's on this card, opening the card. And we just said how Juliana Miller is likely not ready yet for the UFC. It's a weird fight to pick. Again, both these fighters I think are relatively unproven. I'm actually going to go with the underdog. I'm going to take Polyana Viana to win by submission. Of course, if you're going to pick Viana, you're likely going to pick her by a finish, and I think she's going to get the finish in this fight. Going Polyana Viana to win this fight by second round submission. I think she's going to be too good and too talented on the ground for Yasmin Lucindo. I think it's a tough step up, because Viana, say what you want, she hasn't really beat a fighter who is really in the UFC anymore, but still, she's been able to go out there. She's been able to go out and get finishes. Lucindo has not seen anybody close to the level of Polyana Viana. Lucindo's lost in the UFC is to a fighter now in Yayargi, who once had hype, but now has dropped to fight Denise Gomez. And Lucindo's beat Brogan Walker, which who cares about? So I'm going to actually go with Polyana Viana to pick up the victory. I like Viana to get it done by second round submission. Our next fight comes in the light heavyweight division. We've got 2 ranked fighters, one at heavyweight and one at light heavyweight. But we've got the ranked light heavyweight fighter here in Khalil Rountree Jr. taking on the former heavyweight in Chris Daukaus. And man, remember the hype that Chris Daukaus had at one point in time. This guy, was once, after the Shamila Durakhimov knockout victory at UFC 266 in Las Vegas in the T-Mobile Arena, people were hyping Chris Daukaus and Tom Aspinall to be the next 2 big, threats at heavyweight. Tom Aspinall has risen to the occasion. He's likely a fight away from the World Championship. For Chris Daukaus, after that win over Shamil Abdurakhimov, they book him in a main event. He gets knocked down in the first round against Derek Lewis. Then gets knocked down in his next fight in a main event against Curtis Blades. And then gets a shot against Biggie Boy, Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And Rozenstruik knocks him out in the first round in 23 seconds. And now he's going down to 205. And I feel like Daukaus has always been one of those guys that you can see that he looks like he could cut down to 205 pounds. And now finally here he comes. He's going to be fighting at 205. But man, they throw him right into the wolves. They don't give him an unranked guy. They give him a ranked light heavyweight in Khalil Rountree Jr. And odds-wise, Rountree looking at minus 200. Daukaus plus 150 on Tapology. 91% going for Khalil Rountree. 9% picking the underdog in this fight in Chris Daukaus. Interesting, because again, Rountree's coming off a 3-fight winning streak. His last fight, he split decision victory over Dustin Jacoby. You go back, you look at that fight. Jacoby outstrikes Rountree. He's there with the volume, but when you really break it down, I guess you can give it to Rountree because of damage, but honestly, I think Jacoby should have won that fight. However, before that, Rountree goes up there, knocks out Carl Roberson, but Roberson, is the guy still in the UFC anymore? He's not, I don't think. He's about to grapple Nick Newell. Roberson has not won a fight since the pandemic started, so there's something on that. I mean, again, at one point in time, he was in a co-main event against Marvin Vettori, which a lot of people thought should have been a main event of a fight night card that was main evented by Cynthia Calvillo and Jessica Ai. But instead, Roberson has not won a fight in his last 4. But that's a win for Khalil Rountree. And then before that, the win, it's an oblique kick finish against Modestas Bukauskas. Again, Bukauskas is a guy who's now made his way back into the UFC. But yeah, they're wins, but they're not the best wins. Now, I can't say anything about Chris Daukaus because the guy hasn't won a fight since 2021. Now, he came into the UFC 4-0. Then he dropped his next 3 fights to Lewis, Blades, and Rosenstrike, who are good fighters. But all I'm saying is, don't count out Chris Daukaus in this fight, because Daukaus is still very capable. Yes, maybe his chin is gone, and he might be depleted at 205 pounds, but I would not count him out in this fight. I really wouldn't, because Rountree hasn't been overly impressive. This is a guy who lost to Marcin Prachnio in Abu Dhabi when Prachnio was on his huge losing streak. Prachnio was dropping fights to Sam Alvey. Mike Rodriguez, he was losing fights, and then he goes in and beats Khalil Rountree, and that's kind of the thing that turned Prachnio's career around. Rountree also lost to Ion Cutelaba, but again, that's back in 2019. So when you look past the Prachnio fight, it's 3 victories for Rountree. There's a reason he's the favorite in this fight, and I'm going to take him. I'm going to take him by first round knockout. However, I'm not saying it's out the realm of possibilities that Chris Daukaus wins this fight, because again, Daukaus is talented. He's got decent striking. I just don't know what Chris Daukaus is going to be at 205 pounds. The last fight that he had at heavyweight was against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He weighed in at 242.5 pounds. He's going to have to cut down to 205 pounds for this fight. If he can make it, what is he going to be? Seriously, what is he going to be at 205 pounds? I don't know. I really don't know. He's going to be a shell of his former self, we think. Yes, he might still have power, but what is that chin going to look like, and how depleted will he be? I'm not going to pick a guy who I don't know how he's going to look come fight night, and I'm going to take the favorite and the guy who is ranked in this weight class in Khalil Rountree. I'm going to take him to win by first round knockout. Again, I just don't know what Daukaus we're going to see, and unfortunately for Chris Daukaus, this likely spells the end for him in the UFC, and likely, Daukaus under the PFL. Anyways, on to our co-main event of the evening. Here we have got in the featherweight division, Cub Swanson takes on Hakeem Dawodu. Cub Swanson is back after his TKO loss to Jonathan Martinez. He will now get Hakeem Dawodu in this one. It's an interesting fight. It is, because Dawodu's coming off a unanimous decision loss. We have not seen him since September of 2022, where he dropped a fight to Juicy J, Julian Rosa, but still 6-3 in the UFC for Dawodu. Had a boatload of hype before that loss to Movsar Evloev. I mean, don't forget his win on a pay-per-view main card over Zubair Tukhugov, who, by the way, saw something on Instagram that Zubair Tukhugov is the 10th most followed UFC fighter on Instagram. Crazy. Anyways, since that win, Dawodu's 1-2 in the UFC, dropping fights to Movsar Evloev, and then a win over Michael Trezano after that, then dropped a fight after that to Julian Rosa, which of course we just talked about. Dawodu had that fight against Lucas Almeida that was canceled, and now here he is against Cub Swanson. Obviously, Dawodu's going to be the favorite, because when Dawodu's on, he looks really good. And now, again, at one point in time, there was, people thought that Dawodu was going to be the next big Canadian star for the UFC. I don't know if he's going to be entirely that, but it's a really good opportunity for him against a guy in Cub Swanson who, he got the big wheel kick knockout win over Darren Elkins in 2021. He came back last year. He lost to Jonathan Martinez. Martinez just chopped his legs out from under him. He knocked him down twice. Again, it is an older Cub Swanson who is 39 years old, who has made the walk into the UFC octagon 22 times already. This will be walk number 23. It is tough. It is tough because, again, he is an older guy who's given everything to the sport, but man, the sport will not give anything to you back because Now, am I saying Hakeem Dawodu is going to knock out Cub Swanson? I don't know, but I think Dawodu is going to be the better fighter in this fight, obviously. I mean, you look at the odds for this one, Dawodu minus 250, Swanson at plus 200. You look at the Tapology picks, 78% going with Hakeem Dawodu, 26 of those 78% going with Dawodu by knockout, then 22% going with Jackson Winkzone in Cub Swanson. I understand it. I really do, because, look at Swanson's wins. They're over Darren Elkins. Daniel Pineda's a good win. I'll give you that. Pineda's a really good win in 2020. Again, Daniel Pineda, though, is another older guy who's 37 years old who just lost to Alex Caceres in his last fight. But that's a good win. The Crone Gracie win at the time looked very good, but Crone Gracie's last fight in the UFC was dog awful against Charles Jourdain. That fight was bad. And then other than that, Swanson's last win is Artem Lobov. And that was in 2017, the main event, I believe, in Fresno? Was that in Fresno? No, it was in Nashville. Still, that was a long time ago, before Swanson's 2 wins over Elkins, Pineda, and Gracie. He's got the loss to Giga Chikadze. Chikadze, that was the fight that really showed, all right, Giga's legit. Now, Giga, I believe, is going to get Caceres next, if I'm not mistaken. But, yeah, and the Martinez fight, too, that was the fight where a lot of people got to see how good Jonathan Martinez truly is. Now, Jonathan Martinez is booked against Adrian Yanez. Obviously, he's beaten Said Nurmagomedov since then, and really, I think Jonathan Martinez is legit. The guy's 9-3 in the UFC, and he's on a 5-fight winning streak. Again, it was once upon a time, some people thought that Jonathan Martinez was going to be a champion in whatever weight class he would like to be in, but I digress. Jonathan Martinez is really good. He is. And so the losses for Swanson aren't bad losses. On his 4-fight losing streak, he lost to Brian Ortega. That was the fight in Fresno, I believe. Frank Yeager, Renato Moicano, and Shane Burgos. Those are not bad losses. The wins, however, just aren't that great either. Hakeem Dawodu has been there, done that. I know he's coming off the loss to Julian Erosa, but the win over Trezano looked really good. He went out there and he outstruck him. The Zubair Tukyugov fight was good too. Again, Dawodu will get in your face, he will strike with you, and he will talk to you in there too. He will tell you that he's beating you in there. And I think he's going to win this fight. I think he's going to go out there and I think he's going to beat Cub Swanson. It's a matter of, does Dawodu get a finish? I don't know, because again, Hakeem Dawodu has not seen the finish in the UFC since UFC 240, which was in Edmonton. That was the Frank Yeager Max Holloway card. He's gotten 1 knockout win in the UFC. He had 6 outside the UFC in World Series of Fighting. I don't think he's going to get a finish here. I know it's an older Cub Swanson, but still, I don't think Dawodu's going to go out there and get a finish. I think he'll do enough, and I definitely think he will outpace Cub Swanson. So give me Hakeem Dawodu to win this fight. He'll win against Cub Swanson by unanimous decision. On to our main event of the evening. In the welterweight division, we have got Vicente Luque versus Rafael Dos Anjos. I think the biggest lead and the biggest headline going into this fight definitely is what the aftermath of what Vicente Luque's last fight was. It's not good. I mean, okay, I'm gonna look up exactly what happened right now, but I believe it's brain bleeding is what happened after Vicente Luque's last fight. That's not good, and I'm surprised it's really not being talked about as much as it is. It just came out, I think, last month, because he just got cleared to fight Rafael Dos Anjos. So the report from the for the Nevada Athletic Commission is this veteran UFC welterweight Vicente Luque received a license in Nevada to fight after suffering a cerebral, I think that's cerebral, I'm not the best reader, hemorrhage following his UFC Vegas 59 loss to Jeff Neal. Luque, 31, was knocked out in the 3rd round of the August 6, 2022 fight and given a minimum 1-year suspension after suffering the brain bleed. Well, he's coming back basically exactly a year after. 371 days since his last fight. He's coming back and he's fighting Rafael Dos Anjos. That's why I'm assuming the first fight that ended up getting the main event spot of Holly Holm and Myro Bueno Silva, that was originally supposed to be Luque and Dos Anjos, but actually it's supposed to be a co-main event to Holly Holm. Anyways, that fight was supposed to happen in July. That's what I'm assuming. It got pushed back a month because of this. But Luque's still fighting? I don't know why it's not being made a bigger deal of. It's tough to pick a guy in a cage fight after something like that. It really is. It's tough. I don't have confidence picking Vicente Luque if I am going to pick Vicente Luque in a 5-round fight against a former world champion in Rafael Dos Anjos, who, again, Dos Anjos had his losses. He had his streak where, like, when he lost to Michael Chiesa, I was like, all right, what are we doing now? But he's come back. He's won against Paul Felder. He beat Neto Moicano. He lost to Rafael Fiziev, but that's going to happen to you. And then he's coming off a submission win where, everyone in the world thought he was going to go out there and submit Brian Barberena in Orlando. Now here he is against Vicente Luque. I mean, I don't know. Again, Dos Anjos has never been that knockout guy. So, but still, you got to think that something from that fight against Jeff Neal with Vicente Luque is going to come back and is going to hurt him in this fight. Again, if the Nevada State Athletic Commission is giving you a one-year medical suspension because of brain bleeding, that doesn't sound great. And even when you look at Luque as a fighter, he didn't look amazing in the Neal fight because Jeff Neal just beat him with a punch every single time. Now, Vicente Luque wins the second round, but he drops the first because Neal drops him in the first round. In the third round, Neal comes back and he finishes him. I don't remember who was talking about Vicente Luque. I forget. It might have been Ariel Helwani or his Chael Sonnen. I don't exactly remember. But someone had brain bleeding in boxing. I don't know. I don't watch boxing. But I don't know. I remember I looked it up. I'm not a boxing fan. I don't know. But what I looked up and I saw is that the last major boxer to get brain bleeding was, I believe he died? I don't know. I think. I don't know. I gotta look it up. Again, I know nothing about boxing. I know Tyson Fury's the lineal champion. I know he's kind of, dodging Usyk. And that's kind of all my boxing knowledge. And I know that Jake Paul's, I'm recording this the day before Jake Paul fights Nate Diaz, right? And I know KSI is going to fight Tommy Fury. I'm not a big boxing fan. I watch Crawford and Earl Spence, but that's the most into boxing I'm going to, get into, right? But I'm not exactly sure who had the brain bleeding. I saw something on Twitter that, of course, the current ROH or Ring of Honor Pure champion, this is pro wrestling now, Shibata had brain bleeding with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and that's kind of why he hasn't returned to New Japan, but he was given clearance, and he's working, of course, in the States now with Ring of Honor. If you don't watch professional wrestling, you're not gonna know who Shibata is, but he's the Pure champion for Ring of Honor, which is owned by All Elite Wrestling. Oh, I'm wearing the shirt. But anyways, I'm just trying to relay it. It's Shibata has come back and he has wrestled since. But again, this isn't real fighting. Of course, wrestling is not completely fake, but obviously they're not trying to kill each other in professional wrestling. In mixed martial arts, they are trying to kill each other, right? It's not going to happen, hopefully. But that's what Rafael Dos Anjos and Vicente Luque will be trying to do to each other on Saturday night. They are going to try to kill each other. That's just how every fight is, right? You have to try to hurt your opponent to win the fight. Professional wrestling, you're not actually trying to hurt your opponent. I mean, well, you kind of are, but at the end of the day, it's wrestling. It's not, again, there is a set outcome and there is a chosen winner, right? In mixed martial arts, both these guys, and I don't need to explain this, but again, they're both trying to go out there and they're both trying to hurt each other. That's why I just think it's tough, because again, Vicente Luque is a guy who just suffered all that damage. I know it was a year ago, but that was the suspension they gave him. He's testing it because he's fighting 5 days after the suspension's over. I don't like the fight. I don't like it. I really don't. I think Rafael Dos Anjos is going to win. That's the pick. I think Dos Anjos is going to win. I think he wins. It would be, I don't know, because I'm thinking by knockout, but Rafael Dos Anjos has not won a fight by knockout in the UFC since he defended his world championship against Donald Cowboy Cerrone back in 2015 in Orlando, Florida, for the lightweight championship. It has been that long since Rafael Dos Anjos has won a fight by knockout in the UFC. However, I kind of feel like this might be the time. What state is Vicente Luque's chin's going to be in? This guy, despite the brain bleeding, he's been in 19 fights in the UFC, and he's been in some damn wars. Look at the fights that he's had. That Luque eats damage. He does. Okay, since the Mike Perry fight, really, Brian Barberena, that fight was, actually, no, the Brian Barberena fight was a war. Luque knocks out Derek Krantz pretty quickly. He gets into a back-and-forth war with Mike Perry in Uruguay. I thought Mike Perry won that fight. He loses to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in a war. He beats Nico Price in a back-and-forth crazy fight. He beats Randy Brown in a pretty, action-packed fight. The Tyron Woodley fight, he submits him in the first round, but Woodley goes for it in that first round. Michael Chiesa, Luque submits early. He loses a 5-round fight against Bilal Muhammad, and he loses that war by knockout to Jeff Neal. Eventually, I think it's going to catch up to him. And I just don't like everything surrounding what Vicente Luque, what we are being told about Vicente Luque going into this fight. I don't like it. I don't like the, you know, the internal brain bleeding. I believe that's the right saying. I could be mistaken. The brain bleeding just isn't great. That's not good. Again, it's been a while, but Rafael dos Anjos is the slight favorite on Tapology. 65% Vicente Luque, 35% Rafael dos Anjos. Only 10% of that 35% taking Rafael dos Anjos are taking him by knockout. I'm going to join the 10%. I'm going to take Rafael dos Anjos by knockout. I think dos Anjos is going to rock him. I think he's going to knock him down late in the fight. And I think Rafael dos Anjos is going to win. I'm going to take him to win by 5th round knockout. I don't know if I've ever taken a 5th round knockout. I think I took Colby to beat Masvidal by 5th round TKO. I'm taking Rafael dos Anjos. Similar to how Rafael Fiziev knocked him out in the 5th round, I think Rafael dos Anjos eventually in that 5th round is going to finish Vicente Luque. I think, again, it's going to be close. It'll be competitive. Luque will get into that war that he usually does get in. But I think in this one, Rafael dos Anjos is going to win the war. And RDA is going to beat Vicente Luque. And he's going to finish the job in the 5th round by TKO in the main event. So, folks, thank y'all for watching our UFC Vegas predictions here on the channel. The main event, of course, being Vicente Luque and Rafael dos Anjos. We will be back next week for UFC 292. I'm actually going to be recording this probably either today or tomorrow. It's going to be 2 weeks in advance, just because I got a whole lot of stuff to do. So I kind of have to do my videos in advance. Right now, there's only 10 fights in that card, so we might just be talking about 10 fights. However, again, that's coming at you next week. Aljamain Sterling, Sean O'Malley in the main event for the Bantamweight Championship, Zhang Wei Li and Amanda Lemos in the co-main event for the Strawweight Championship. And make sure to join us tomorrow for our Bellator 298 predictions with Brennan Ward and Logan Storley in the main event. And then also next week, we will have PFL playoff predictions as well. They're taking a week off this week. So next week, PFL 8, which will be in the main event. For now, Hanan Ferreira taking on Maurice Green in the heavyweight division. Your other heavyweight fight, Jordan Heiderman taking on Dennis Goltsov, which I think should be the main event, but it's not. And then also in the women's featherweight division, you've got Marina Mohatina, who cares, and Amber Lee Brock, who cares. Larissa Pacheco and Olena Kolesnik will do battle in their trilogy fight. What are we doing? Anyways, folks, thank y'all for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Thanks for watching, and Mamba forever.